Good evening. Welcome to This Week in Turkey. The main opposition Republican People's Party, CHP, announced Muharrem İnce as its presidential candidate today in the upcoming June 24th snap elections.
Following the call for snap elections in Turkey on June 24th, the ruling and opposition parties have all announced their presidential candidates. The ruling Justice and Development Party, AKP, formally nominated the party founder and leader, President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan, as its candidate. All 316 members of the AKP's parliamentary group voted in favor of nominating Erdoğan. The Nationalist Movement Party, MHP, will also be supporting Erdoğan. Erdoğan, who has been ruling the country since 2002, has been holding the presidential post since 2014. Meanwhile, the opposition, which has been scrambling to put forward candidates and establish alliances, also announced its candidates. The main opposition Republican People's Party, CHP, announced Muharrem İnce as its presidential candidate. A deputy from the northwestern province of Yalova, Muharrem İnce is a former physics teacher. In February, İnce had challenged Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu for the CHP chair. "I will be the president of 80 million, of rightists and leftists, of Alevis and Sunnis, of Turks and Kurds. I will be an impartial president," İnce said earlier today. The third largest party of the parliament, People's Democratic Party, HDP, announced its imprisoned former leader Selahattin Demirtaş as its presidential candidate. Demirtaş was a candidate against Erdoğan in the 2014 presidential elections and led the HDP into the parliament for the first time in the June 2015 polls. On the Good Party front, Meral Akşener, who had unofficially announced her candidacy much earlier, officially submitted an application. Akşener had reportedly refused to step down in an early attempt to announce former president and AKP founder Abdullah Gül as a joint candidate of the opposition. Although Akşener had the necessary candidacy counts in the parliament, she is reported to have collected the necessary 100,000 signatures for nomination. Another important candidate seeking to collect 100,000 signatures for nomination is the leader of the conservative Felicity Party, Temel Karamollaoğlu. As a prominent Islamist and experienced politician, Karamollaoğlu has played an important role during the talks to unite the opposition. The Supreme Electoral Council of Turkey also announced that Vecdi Öz and Doğu Perinçek can run for presidency if they collect the necessary number of signatures. The ultimate candidacy list will be declared in the official gazette on May 13th. To win in the first round of the presidential elections, a candidate needs more than 50% of the votes.
Joining us now to talk about the newly formed Good Party is Taylan Yıldız, who's an advisor to the Good Party chairwoman Meral Akşener. Good evening, Mr. Yıldız. Welcome to This Week in Turkey.
Good evening. Thank you very much.
So, what does the party promise for the future of Turkey and Turkish democracy?
Well, Turkey always went through difficult times and went through them using democracy. And right now, we actually see that in Turkey, the fundamental rights and freedoms of the people are fundamentally threatened. And we really strayed away from the peace at home and peace in the world motto that was set out by our, founding father Atatürk, And we wanted to be the big boss of Middle East. That has been the policy of the current regime, unfortunately. And also, the future of our economy is not really looking bright. Everybody says the same thing, and even we just got the Standard & Poor's numbers about how they see the Turkish economy and this of poor quality. And no one can actually talk about justice anymore. People don't have hope. So we didn't form the party, the public did. They actually pushed us to form the party because we need this problem that we actually have been in for a long period of time. So what Good Party is doing is we're working towards building a free, open, and safe society that's actually strengthening the rule of law and that's actually promoting the separation of powers, and that's a country that's at peace with its neighbors and where the citizens have equal opportunity, equal access to good education, so that anybody that actually works hard can get to places. That has been the motto of the Turkish Republic for the longest time, where there was class transparency and people could move from one social strata to another with very little help from their parents in terms of economic power. But right now we don't see it in Turkey. So what we're promising is all of those and more.
And Mr. Yıldız, how do you evaluate the recently formed election alliance between your party, the main opposition CHP, the center-right Democrat Party, and the Islamist Felicity Party?
That actually makes me really hopeful about the future of our Turkish Republic, and that's because when people revolt around tyranny, when people revolt around oppression, we don't see any right-wing or left-wing people. We just see patriots, and that has been the case when we had our wars, our independence wars in the beginning. So what we're doing right now is we have a constitution that we have to protect. And our constitution, by design, is something that resonates with everybody that calls himself or herself as a Turkish citizen. So in that sense, our hearts are in it together. So we don't see any problem with actually having this alliance. That actually makes us more hopeful about the future, because for the first time, all these people that come from all walks of life, we're actually protecting our society, we're protecting our way of life, and we're protecting our dignity as a nation.
So we know through the media that prior to taking up your current position as an advisor to Mrs. Akşener, the Good Party's chairwoman, you've worked at Google for over 10 years. So my question to you is, at a time when Turkey is experiencing unprecedented levels of brain drain, what made you give up your job at Google, return home, join the Good Party, and become an advisor to Mrs. Akşener?
So, well, first of all, I thought about myself, like, I looked around to see if anybody else is doing it, and nobody else was doing it. So I thought, if I don't do it, nobody else will. And my motto, at least, is courage is contagious. So if people see me do this, people that have more talent than I do, people that have more career than I do, maybe they're more handsome than I do, that actually they would do it, and they would come with more courage than I have. So in that sense, I just want to set a good example to the rest of the people who actually wants to work for Turkish democracy. And one thing that I felt really passionate about was I felt like I wouldn't have a country to go back to if I actually didn't do this. So that was a really huge motivation for us. And when everybody was trying to run away from the country, we want to make a country that everybody wants to come back to.
So both you and your party have a strong presence in the social media, and those in Turkey who are active social media users have probably come across some of the rather unusual online events that you've taken part in, such as playing Counter-Strike with students and young people. What does this tell us about your party's communication strategy and its vision on the youth of the country?
Yeah, so first of all, I wouldn't call it communication strategy. I'm calling it as representing the real people, because people, especially young people, they play Counter-Strike all the time, and it's of high value to them. And they learn how to build teams. They know how to compromise. They know how to take roles. So that's fundamentally what they do. And our politics and people who represent us actually have to represent them. And I think it was weird that it hadn't happened in the past, and we're just trying to represent, the real people of Turkey. And in that sense, we're really happy that our chairwoman, Ms. Akşener, set out a role for us to actually go and listen to the young people, understand what they do, and also empathize with them. And I'm, I guess, lucky because I already play Counter-Strike a lot. I just like playing it, so that was a great fit for me. And in that sense, I think I just want to say one thing about how powerful that is if, for example, we want to tell that we want to build fiber optic cables all over Turkey to speed up internet, the best way to tell you is while you're playing the game, the pings, which is how long it takes for your actions to go to the server, actually it takes a long time in Turkey, so it's really hard to play the game. So we can tell about our fiber optic strategies by playing the game to people who have very little to do with politics, traditionally speaking. So that actually opens up another venue for us, and it also tells the voters, tells the young people that we understand their real concerns, because that's what they think about every day.
And finally, Mr. Yıldız, according to your observations, what's the biggest problem faced by the youth in Turkey at the moment?
The biggest problem is unemployment. It's by far the biggest problem. And right now we have over 20-30% unemployment rate in Turkey. And the biggest reason for that is poor planning, because we're not educating our youth well, number one. And number two, the people who are educated well can still not find jobs, because the way Turkey grew was not by building our industry, by building manufacturing plants, but it was by creating, our construction sector. And the problem with construction sector in that case is you don't need electrical engineers, you don't need mechanical engineers, you don't need a lot of accountants, you don't need many of those people, right? So when that happens, all these people with those skills actually have a hard time finding jobs, because right now there are over 300,000 contractors who are actually building buildings right now, as opposed to we should be channeling some of those resources to actually building manufacturing plants.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yıldız, for joining us tonight and for your comments.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
We'll continue with our next news video on the Good Party.
İYİ Party, or Good Party in English, was established on October 25, 2017 by former Interior Minister and prominent right-wing politician Meral Akşener. By many in Turkey, the Good Party is seen as one of the strongest challengers to Erdogan and his ruling Justice and Development Party AKP in the upcoming presidential and parliamentary elections scheduled for June 24th. Turkey and its people are tired, the state is worn down, and public order is unraveling. There is no way other than the changing of the political atmosphere, Akşener said in her speech marking the launch of her party in Ankara last year. The party quickly gained 5 members of parliament in the Turkish Grand National Assembly who were originally elected for other parties, and numerous provincial and municipal council members that also defected from their former parties. On April 22nd, a further 15 MPs from the CHP moved to the Good Party following a joint agreement between the two parties. This was to allow the Good Party to formally form a parliamentary group that would be eligible to announce a presidential candidate without the need to collect signatures and compete as independent. Meral Akşener, the secular nationalist leader of the Good Party, was the first to declare she would challenge President Recep Tayyip Erdogan in June snap elections. She was born in 1956 in the northwestern province of Izmit to a family of Balkan Muslims from Thessaloniki. She studied history at Istanbul University and later earned a PhD in history from Marmara University. Prior to entering politics, Akşener worked as a lecturer at Yıldız Technical University. Although known to be a secular nationalist, she has often been described as a devout Muslim who prays regularly. To her followers, she is known as Asena, after the she-wolf figure from Turkic mythology. She quit her post as a university department chair in 1994 and entered politics in the general elections of 1995 as deputy representing Istanbul with the True Path Party, DYP. Akşener was the Minister of the Interior between 1996 and 1997, replacing Mehmet Ağar, who had resigned as a result of his involvement in the Susurluk scandal. She was later forced out of office after the 1997 military memorandum on February 28th. Akşener was re-elected to parliament in the 1999 general elections as a deputy of the Kocaeli province. She was later re-elected in the general elections of 2007 and 2011, representing Istanbul as a member of the Nationalist Movement Party, MHP. She parted her ways with the MHP in 2016 over Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's bid to transform Turkey's constitution and subsequently formed her own party.
The main opposition, CHP, and 3 other opposition parties reached an agreement this week to form an alliance for the upcoming snap elections on June 24th.
Turkey's main opposition, Republican People's Party, CHP, and 3 other opposition parties have reached a deal to form an alliance for the snap parliamentary elections scheduled for June 24th. The deal will enable the 3 smaller parties in the alliance, namely the newly formed Nationalist Good Party, the Islamist Felicity Party, and the center-right Democrat Party, to skirt a regulation that mandates parties to receive at least 10% of the vote to enter parliament. Erdogan's ruling Justice and Development Party AKP, meanwhile, has established an alliance with the Nationalist Movement Party MHP. The opposition alliance does not include the pro-Kurdish People's Democratic Party HDP, and there are concerns that the opposition bloc might not be large enough to challenge the AKP, since there is a possibility that the HDP cannot meet the 10% electoral threshold. HDP has suffered a wide-ranging government crackdown that has led to the imprisonment of many of its MPs and officials. The party's 2 leaders were jailed, and one has lost her parliamentary status after a terror conviction. CHP is also being criticized for excluding left-wing parties in the opposition alliance. A Social Democratic Party should form an alliance with other leftist parties, HDP Deputy Group Chair Filiz Kerestecioğlu said about the opposition bloc. Two right-wing alliances will be competing in the upcoming election. They will all be on one side and the HDP will be on the other side, Kerestecioğlu added. Deputy Prime Minister Bekir Bozdağ also criticized the four-party bloc as an alliance of anger, saying that they had come together simply to express opposition to President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan. The protocol of the opposition alliance will be signed by four-party leaders on May 5th. The election schedule obliges parties to register their alliance protocol by May 6th. The parties are also considering an official name for the alliance, with four names being suggested in particular, which are Democracy Alliance, National Alliance, Justice Alliance, and National Alliance for Democracy. Apart from the two alliances and HDP, the other parties set to compete are the Grand Unity Party (BBP), Independent Turkey Party (BTP), Patriotic Party (VP), and the Free Cause Party (Hüdapar).
Standard & Poor's downgraded Turkey's debt rating this week.
Rating agency Standard & Poor's said on Tuesday that it has cut the rating on Turkey's foreign debt due to deteriorating finances and rising inflation. The grade on Turkey's foreign currency debt dropped to speculative BB-/B for long and short-term issues respectively. But with a stable outlook, S&P said in a statement, "Our downgrade reflects our view that there is a risk of a hard landing for Turkey's overheating, credit-fueled economy," the agency said. S&P said imbalances, including worsening current account and fiscal deficits, as well as high inflation, were building up, while the share of short-term debt had increased. In addition, the depreciation of the currency was a risk to Turkey's financial stability. Signs of distress in the private sector are starting to show, and capital outflows and the Turkish lira's depreciation may accelerate this trend, the agency said. Turkish Deputy Prime Minister Mehmet Şimşek has slammed S&P's rating decision. The timing of the decision is very meaningful. Cutting the credit rating after Turkey's decision to bring elections forward is wrong, he said. S&P's criticism of the Turkish economy overheating is last year's narration, Şimşek said, adding that financial conditions are tighter this year.
Prime Minister Binali Yıldırım announced on Monday a debt restructuring and social reform package ahead of the June 24th snap elections.
The Turkish parliament is due to put into effect a debt restructuring and social reform package costing nearly $6 billion ahead of the June 24th snap elections. The package, announced by Prime Minister Binali Yıldırım on April 30th, includes schemes to restructure tax and premium debts to public institutions, as well as traffic, election, and military service fines. The government will also take steps toward registering the nearly 13 million buildings without deeds across the country. In addition, the government will hand out 1,000 liras to pensioners before the two main annual Muslim holidays and increase allowance of 265 liras paid every 3 months to citizens over 65 years old to 500 liras. Students who have been unable to complete their university degrees in 7 years will also be allowed to go back to school as long as they have not been linked to terrorism, Prime Minister Yıldırım said. The measures are estimated to cost the state between 22 and 24 billion Turkish liras, or almost $6 billion. Prime Minister said it will be paid for by revenue from plans to register millions of unlicensed properties. The package, meanwhile, was slammed by the opposition as pre-election bribery.
International Press Institute Chairman John Yearwood gave an interview to Mediascope on World Press Freedom Day.
I've been involved in IPI for quite some time, and this is about as strong a statement that we have released on any of the various crises that we're facing around the world as it relates to journalists. But we thought it was important that we release a strong statement that, one, supports the journalists at Cumhuriyet, to make them know, one, that IPI is with them, that we hear them, and we'll continue to support them. And make them also aware that the international community, not just IPI, but the international community is with them. And to let them know that we also think that the only crime they committed was practicing journalism, which, as you know, is not a crime. And we have said that, and said that repeatedly. Journalism is not a crime. But if you look at what the government did, it arrested them for practicing journalism. And we think it's really critical that they know that, that we think they did not commit a crime. And so we wanted, in fact, one of the things that, that we said in this statement, which I think it's important for your listeners to hear and your viewers to hear, is that we said in part, the sentence against our fellow executive board member, Kadri Gürsel, is an attack on us all. It is an insult to those of us who have dedicated our professional life to the type of independent, critical, public interest journalism that Kadri, Murat, Ahmed, and their colleagues at Cumhuriyet have worked to deliver every day. And one other thing that I think you should know is that we said, we know that the Cumhuriyet defendants did not commit a criminal offense. All they did was journalism of the highest quality, which make us all so proud to count Kadri as a member of our executive board and to also count the various...
Now let's take a look at what's on in Istanbul next week.
Tonight, Chancha via Circuito and Click Frick will be on Babylon's stage. Chancha via Circuito, a project created by Pedro Canale with the interaction of different types of music, combines authentic Latin American acoustic tunes and minimal electronic rhythms. Canale is among the pioneers of his generation with albums and singles that he has released since 2005. Click and Frick is the new project of the Argentinian duo Rafa Caivano and Lisandro Sona, known as Frick's Tailors. They create a connection between roots and future, blending South America's archaic rhythms with synthesizers and groovebox sounds. Plevneli is hosting Tayfun Sertaç's solo exhibition titled Flashback until May 26th. The Meryem Şahinyan archive will be exhibited at an art gallery for the first time since being made public in 2011. Flashback is also the most comprehensive exhibition to date of the artist's continuing relationship with visual archives as conceived in a spatial context. For 60 years, Meryem Şahinyan sustained an uninterrupted career in studio photography, a profession under the monopoly of men, and she did not only take photographs. She also included in her frame a specific social section of the history of the Turkish Republic that was highly difficult to access visually. Şahinyan was a woman, and for over half a century, a master of a profession that was not granted to her. She enabled the production of a visual history that stood distinct from the male gaze.
That's all from This Week in Turkey. Thanks for tuning in and hope to see you again next Friday at 9 p.m. Goodbye.